How y'all doing?
All right.
Word, word. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to confirm I'm doing one now and one at the end, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So, Mr. Hearns gave a great segue into this first piece talking about we're all experts in our own personal experiences. This first poem that I'm going to share with you all is all about my personal experiences growing up as a mixed child. With that comes a lot of different variables and many self-identity crises as you're growing up, and this poem kind of talks about that. I'm also very excited to be here because I'm a Tampa native. I grew up in Tampa and I graduated from Blake High School. In any event that I can feel closer to my Tampa roots, and not only that, my Black Tampa roots, really is a great moment for me, and I'm going to take every second of this in. So thank you again for having me. This poem is called Dog Eyes. My first kiss was in the second grade with a girl named Samantha. Samantha was one of my best friends. She whispered in my ear one day on the playground that she loved me. I whispered back that I loved her too. I dated a girl in high school for 2 months named Holly. I dated a girl in high school for 1 year and 2 months named Ashley. My last ex's name that I spent almost 3 years with is Kelly. My mother's name is Kimberly. My Aunt Rhonda calls her Bim Bom. My grandmother's name is Rebecca. All my life, I've called her Grandma Becky. My great-grandmother's name was Hilda, an immigrant from Germany, so I always called her Oma. Oma hated living in America, but she loved the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. She went to every home game until she couldn't. I loved my Oma. I have loved white women since before I knew how to love my blackness, since before I knew what it felt like to love and be loved by a black woman, back before, when I couldn't breathe anything but contradiction. Black boy with white mouth, all bite and no bark, dog eyes, can't see himself as being any color. And his daddy tells him he's black, but the other black boys tell him he's white. Back when a token was something you spent at an arcade, not something you were. Funny joke I heard in the 5th grade from one of my friends. How do you get black kids to stop jumping on the bed? Easy. Just put Velcro on the ceiling. I never understood why I couldn't find any laughter hidden in the corners of this white mouth. Maybe it was because my hair didn't grow like the other black boys. Maybe it was because almost everything about me wasn't like the other black boys. 7th grade, I moved from my predominantly white school to a school in a sea of black faces, most darker than mine. And I cried every day after school for the first week, y'all, because I felt like I just couldn't fit in. And everybody just wants to be able to fit inside their own body. Fast forward to my first year of college, spent on FAMU's campus in Tallahassee, Florida, a school historically known for being a sea of black faces, most darker than mine. And I fell in love for the first time with myself. Now today, and my pops was right, I am a black man falling in love for the first time with a black woman. Birthed from a hurricane off the coast of Barbados, she's taught me the darkest star can shine the brightest. We call each other lover without moving our lips. We sing, and it sounds like church organs being played underwater. We exchange organs, our hearts too big for our bodies. These veins pump nothing but blood on the good days and on the bad ones too. The love of my life, my wife, the mother of my child, is a beautiful black woman named Zen Christian. Our first kiss was on our second date, and I whispered in her ear one night in bed that I loved her. And she whispered back, y'all, that she loved me too. Thank you.
Unbelievable. If you'll allow me this privilege, Mr. Davis, could we have your wife please stand? All right. That's going to be hard to top. We have a documentary film, and we're going to show about a 9-minute clip, which sort of sets the stage for this evening's program. And then we're going to introduce our panel. We have 6 amazing people who are going to share some of their life history with you. To set the stage, we have part of the documentary, The Tampa Technique, which was a 2017 documentary done by Dr. Travis Bell, University of South Florida, Director of Graduate Programs and Research, and Associate Professor of Digital and Sports Media in the Zimmerman School of Advertising and Mass Communications. That's a long title to say the man is heavy in what he does. And let me just share this story. When Dr. Bell was working on the final phases of his PhD program, and he was going to do a paper, perhaps a book, on the Tampa Technique, which you'll learn a little bit more about in the video. But for those of you who were here in 1967, you will remember what happened right here in this community in Central Park Village when we had the tragic death of a 19-year-old young man named Martin Chambers while he was fleeing from police custody. He was shot and killed here in this community, and at Tampa General Hospital he passed. And for the next 4 days we had chaos here in the city. But that was the beginning of some conversations about race relations, what needed to be done, what had to be done, and what we could do to try to bring people together in Tampa. So this clip is going to show you just a little bit of information about some of the black communities and neighborhoods that many of us lived in during that time. So if we could go with the clip now, and you'll watch the screen, and we'll see a portion of the documentary, The Tampa Technique.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I want to take this occasion to talk to you about what that law means to every American. This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country.
Okay, so by 1964, I think Tampa had sort of been gradually moving toward some kind of equality. Tampa was just like any other city, not so much in terms of violence. We didn't have dramatic violence like in other southern cities. But I think that there are a lot of different ways that Tampa could show itself as the South.
What the white civic leaders had worked for was the threat of a Civil Rights Act. They were working to avoid the passage of federal legislation because they could not design how that federal legislation would work, or they couldn't control what it did.
Civil Rights Acts, in terms of how it played itself out in Tampa, was a greater sense of freedom about being able to operate in this environment. Now, you have to remember that it's interesting, blacks knew more about whites than whites knew about blacks. And so we were still kind of a mystery in some ways.
What happens in this post-civil rights moment? And there's this expectation, I think, among much of the white population that civil rights is now done. That, right, we have the Civil Rights Act, we have the Voting Rights Act. That is over, let's move on. And what African American communities across the urban United States in the late 1960s are saying, in a lot of cases, is no, we're not done. There are still issues to be addressed.
I don't feel that in the areas of housing there were major transformations until much later.
Central Park Village was built in 1955. It replaced the scrub, at least in that area between Orange Avenue and Nebraska Avenue. So the scrub went away. All of these wood frame homes that were barely standing, many of them that had been sitting there 60, 70 years, they went away. Public housing came into that area, Central Park Village.
Everything that existed for white people in their communities existed right there in Central Avenue, and right behind Central Avenue was Central Park Village housing project.
After World War II, there's a lot of federal dollars available for housing. You see Tampa taking this money and using it for Progress Village. So I think the strategy was that Tampa would spend federal dollars on black constituents. Local money would still, for the most part, go towards the wealthier communities.
The area east of Nebraska Avenue, where Maryland Avenue was, and that Maryland Avenue project, that was the first time in the history of the city of Tampa that African American-led organizations actually were able to participate in redevelopment.
A number of scholars have written about how urban renewal, the interstate system, and again, federal home mortgages were used to break up these minority enclaves. That's where you get the definition of these areas being designated as slums and slum removal and so on, and this was the problem.
Progress Village was born, and they were trying to find a place to relocate African Americans that was in that part of the city and in other parts of the city where the interstate went through, like West Tampa, Culver City, places like that, and they created Progress Village.
And the people who moved to Progress Village were those who were being displaced because of urban redevelopment, the changing of highway patterns through the city. And so they set this up as a model community. It was a segregated community. That was not interracial housing back then.
It helped to reproduce what we talk about, a number of social differences in terms of who gets displaced, who has power, who has a right to the city.
Basically, urban renewal, which seemed like a good idea initially, but really it ended up being a strategy for moving black people out of the city and really kind of pushing them to move into areas that were designated as Negro areas.
The interstate system came in mid-60s. It was during President Eisenhower's administration. During World War II, he saw in Germany this Autobahn system where you have high-speed roadways that connect cities. When the roadway gets to a major urban center, it's a beltway around the center. And if you want to visit within that urban center, use local roads. So that was the original thinking around it until politics reared its ugly head.
The major highways that are built through a lot of downtown areas tend to target minority communities, which from the perspective of urban planners, these are classified as slums. From the perspective of residents, they are thriving communities and business areas.
The highway construction that was going to, open up Tampa to more rapid commerce and transportation came at a loss for the poorest, the victims of a system that had kept them out of the economic and political development of this country.
That was this level of displacement that was combined with urban renewal programs that came along a few years later. And you have to remember during this time, a lot of legislation that we take for granted was not in the books. The Interstate Highway System Act preceded the Civil Rights Act by 8 years.
In a lot of ways, we were witnessing the demise of the community. Also, there were other opportunities that opened up so that geographically, we had access to places that we hadn't before.
I guess the interstate for for the community as a whole, what's seen is symbolic of progress. Now we've got this way we can travel faster and quicker and that kind of thing. But it really destroyed many of our community, African American communities, split them up. People had to move to other places. It was a demise for many African American communities. It was, yeah, death, if you will.
So again, we want to thank Dr. Bell for allowing us to share his amazing video. And the entire documentary is a little under an hour. You can Google it. It's called the Tampa Technique. You can play the whole thing, and I think you'll learn a lot more about Tampa's history and maybe some things that are brand new information to some folk, especially if you did not grow up here. So let me just see a show of hands. How many of you grew up in Tampa? Raise your hands. Okay, so we got quite a few folk, but then there are many others who did not grow up here, and maybe a lot of this is all new information to you. So I'm going to help set the stage as we prepare to bring our panel up. In 2017, Richard Rothstein argued in his award-winning book titled The Color of Law, The Color of Law, a forgotten history of how our government segregated America, that, quote, African Americans were unconstitutionally denied the means and the right to integrate in middle-class neighborhoods, and because of this denial and state-sponsored acts, the nation is obligated to remedy them. Now, that's his opinion. And he also points out that none of this was by accident. This was the result of limited educational opportunities, job discrimination, limited wages, and generational wealth that was missing because of some of the things that happened that put certain people in certain positions. Regardless of what neighborhood we grew up in, it was not an accident. We can look back to 1933. That was 90 years ago. President Delano Roosevelt developed public housing. That was the beginning of what became all of the public housing projects that we had here in the city of Tampa. The federal government funded, now listen to this, the federal government funded, quote, separate projects for African Americans, segregated buildings by race, or excluded African Americans entirely from certain developments. And then we had things like schools built in certain neighborhoods that were certain to attract black families. Middleton High School on the east side, Blake High School on the west side. Where do you think people were going to live? Near those schools, right? We also know that in 1935, a couple of things happened. President Roosevelt signed the National Labor Relations Act, and that opened up many opportunities for blacks. And we can look here locally to International Longshoremen Association Local 1402. And Mr. Perry Harvey, the longtime president, and then Perry Harvey Jr., and there were other leaders who helped to develop the black middle class so that black men could make better wages than they were allowed to make earlier. I'm going to mention some other years before I close. 1937, federal government required local municipalities to set up their own housing authorities. So that was the beginning of the Tampa Housing Authority, 1937. But again, the federal government said, if you want our dollars, you are going to segregate people moving into these developments. And so many people were in poor and inadequate housing that they couldn't wait until public housing was built. The first public housing project built in Tampa, North Boulevard Homes on Main Street in West Tampa, 1940. Built for, and this is written into the agreement, 500 colored families. 1941, Ponce de Leon, built for 500 Latin families, okay, in East Tampa. Also in 1941, Riverview Terrace, built for 500, help me complete the sentence, built for 500 white families. You see a pattern here? Colored families, Latin families, white families. 1945, College Hill Colored Homes, built for colored families. 1953, Robles Park, surprise, built for white families, but 10 years later, it was almost all black. But originally, Robles Park was built for white families. Central Park Village, 1955, again, built for colored families, and now we have Encore, and on and on and on. So my point is that these were not accidents when you found groups of people living in certain places because it was mandated by law and by local custom. And so we have these different neighborhoods that were considered appropriate for certain people based on the color of their skin. 1961, Mayor Julian Lane, and Julian Lane had taken a hit in 1960 because he supported the black students who were demonstrating to desegregate F.W. Woolworth, W.T. Grant, some of the other lunch counters in downtown Tampa. And so the following year, when he set up a housing commission, initially it was all white, and there were a few blacks on it, but then he was sort of forced to remove the blacks because political reasons dictated that this be representative of the people who had the power in the city. Blacks were being steered into Negro communities, and whites moved out whenever blacks moved into those communities. And what happened to the property values? They went down. We know in 1962, President JFK ended discrimination against blacks in FHA financing. Many of our parents and grandparents, and maybe some folk here, bought your homes through FHA or VA, and that was discriminatory until the president began to push back against that. 1964, as you saw in the video, Civil Rights Act eliminated housing. We also had the first black person on the Tampa Housing Authority board, Reverend G.J. Oates. Some of you may remember Reverend Oates. That was in the mid-60s. And so today we find that the legacy of that discrimination in many cases is still with us. We don't have to look too far, and we can still see pockets that reflect a certain ethnic group. And again, this was designed 100 years ago to be the way that it is today. So with that, I'm going to introduce the members of our panel, and then we're going to hear from them. And I'm going to introduce each one. They're going to come up and take their seat. First, Ms. Cynthia Ozephyr Keaton. She grew up in the College Hill homes, and we actually have her address here. 2020 East Lake Avenue, apartment 535. Come on up and have a seat. Ms. Keaton, give her a hand. Ms. Keaton attended College Hill Elementary School, now Lockhart Elementary School, Young Junior High School, and George S. Middleton High School, graduated with the class of 1971, the last graduating class of that original Middleton High School. And that was when integration began after her senior year, 1971. She is environmental health coordinator, the first childhood-led program for children here in Hillsborough County. I asked also where she lives currently, Town and Country, is that correct? And the first to help children who were diagnosed with lead poisoning. Very, very serious thing. Nice hand again for Ms. Keaton. Ms. Frances Cheeks Jennings. Give her a nice hand as Ms. Jennings comes forward. Ms. Jennings grew up in Tampa Heights along Highland Avenue. She attended Harlem Academy, Harlem Elementary School, George Washington Carver Junior High School, and Howard W. Blake Comprehensive High School. She's a retired registered nurse practitioner, and currently she lives in West Tampa in the Riverside community. Ms. Jennings. Bishop Michelle Billings, is that right? Patty. Bishop Patty. Many of you know Bishop Patty through her radio show on WTMP, which I call in on and voice my opinion quite a bit. What's the name of that show, Bishop? What's really happening? She grew up in West Hyde Park, and she's going to talk about some of those memories tonight. She attended Dobyville Elementary School, Howard W. Blake High School, and Blessed Hope Bible College. Occupation, the owner of Michelle B. Patty Referral Service, Accident Referral Service, and she currently lives in Brandon. Nice hand for Bishop Patty. Our city councilman, he's always going to be a city councilman to me, Mr. Frank Reddick. Give him a nice hand, please. Mr. Reddick lives in North Boulevard Homes. That's where he lived as a child in West Tampa, North Boulevard Homes. He attended Carver Elementary School, Just Junior High School, Plant High School, and King High School, and Payne College. Former city councilman, retired for the city of Tampa, and currently he lives in the Northview Hills community. Nice hand for Mr. Reddick. Mr. Don Lee. Did Don come back? Don was here early. Here he comes. I knew he was somewhere around here. Come on up, Don. Yeah. Grew up in West Tampa, in Central Park Village, and in Jackson Heights. So he's got a lot to talk about tonight. He attended St. Peter Claver School, Mary Help, Tampa Catholic, and Tampa Bay Tech High Schools. Occupation, chef, and that's an understatement. He's a chef superb. Current community, he lives in Jackson Heights. Nice hand for Don Lee. And we saved the tallest person for last, Mr. Artie Fryer. Come on up, Artie. Artie was a tremendous basketball player not too long ago, and a good friend. Grew up in the Jackson Heights community. Attended Lomax and Potter Elementary Schools, Young Junior High School, and Middleton High School. He's retired. He currently lives in West Chase. Nice hand for Mr. Artie Fryer. So, for our panel, we have 3 questions we're going to ask each one. The first one, we're going to ask if you could hold your response to 4 or 5 minutes, and then we have 2 more questions of 2 minutes each. So, what was it about the community that you grew up in that had the greatest influence on making you the person that you are today? What was it about the community that you grew up in that had the greatest influence on making you the person that you are today? And we'll start here with Ms. Keaton.
Growing up in College Hill, projects, they were not considered projects, they were homes, College Hill homes, and I want to correct that. I grew up with a family of 8 girls. I was number 8 out of my sisters. My father worked for the city of Tampa, and those bricks that you see laid out there downtown is some of the work that he did. My mother was a homemaker. I grew up in College Hill, and I was born at, believe it or not, Tampa General Hospital. And It was amazing because growing up with 9 women in the family was something else for my dad. But he was strong-willed. He was a man that loved to make jokes and aggravate my mother all the time because he always took the side of the girls. But my parents were really an influence on us to be more than what they were about. They put all 8 of us through college. My oldest sister, I have 5 that was in the school system. Betty Keaton and Griffin, she married Ben Griffin, who was a principal at the time, and Mary Louise Keaton, who was married to Fleming, and they both worked in the school system. Then Juanita, who was both Betty and Mary, they were at middle schools and elementary schools. Juanita was a social worker. Rutha worked for GTE back when they had the operators on the phone. Evelyn and Rutha went to Gibbs Junior College, and Shirley, myself, and Ollie, we were the last 3. We went to Savannah State. Betty and Juanita, they went to FAMU, and our parents instilled in us to be more than we can be. And that was the greatest thing. And they were a force to be reckoned with because we grew up with God in everything that we did. I was a member of the church that is back in behind us. Allen Temple AME, it is no longer there, but I grew up in that church. Now it's located on Palm Avenue. We were all spiritually inclined to be more than what we can be. And my job just took me to the place of working for Hunt Wessett Foods in Savannah, Georgia, and I stayed there for 2 years. And it was prejudice that caused me to leave. I could not deal with that. And from there, I started working for Georgia Department of Agriculture as a state inspector. From there, I stayed 7 years. And from there, I came back home because my mom wanted me home. And I had a son at that time. I joined the military to pay for my tuition because I didn't want my parents to have to pay for that after doing for 7 of the others. But I ended up going to the military. And I went on a buddy plan with my friend, but I got kicked out after 5 months. Only because they said I lied to the government. But I just want to say that growing up, we were very influenced by being more than what we can be. And to this day, I still have that because I'm now a person who loved working in the community. I had chances of going to another country to do missionary work. And that's my thing today is I love working in the community. I grew up in an area that, as a child, that we did everything in the community. Everybody that was in that area on on Lake Avenue, we were all partners, all children based on one family. And we did everything together. And I just want to say it was the most rewarding thing that I can ever think about in my life, to have parents and a community. Because we had a lady they called a cigar Bill. She had a cigar that she would put in her mouth. But she took care of all of the children in the neighborhood. When we got out of school, she made sure we got home safely and went into the house. She would walk in with us and go out the back door and start with the next group of people. It was just a very close community. We played together. We did every kind of children game there was to play.
Well, thank you, Ms. Keaton. Nice hand for her opening comments. Ms. Jennings, same question. What was it about the community that you grew up in that had the greatest influence on the person that you are today?
The community that I grew up in, the Highland Avenue community, Highland extended from Cass, and our ending limit was at Palm Avenue, and we didn't live across Palm. The only family that lived on Palm was Miss Clark and the Gardner family. Miss Gardner was one of the first black superintendents of schools here in Hillsborough County. Piece of information. We were all close. Everybody was close. We played together. Usually we went to the same churches together. We went to schools together, except when you got in high school, you had one family that may have had 5 or 6 children. Some went to Blake and some went to Middleton. We were all sharers. We were all givers. You would look after each other. The older kids would look after the younger kids. We didn't have daycare back during that time. I remember my mother told me when I was young, a baby, that I did go to Helping Hand. It was like 50 cents a week when it was here on Central Avenue. But we took care of each other. We loved each other, and we provided and we protected each other. We had the stores in the community. The people who owned the store, whether they were Italian, Cubans, or whatever they were, they lived at that place where they had their business. I remember Rose store, they lived in the back. The Giovincos on Palm and Highland, they had the shoe store, and then they had the grocery store. Mary Giovinco, she lived on Highland. These were not African Americans, but these were other races of people who lived in the black community. We knew those. We played with their kids. And, of course, Buck's store on Scott and Highland Avenue, we played with their kids. We played with all the kids in the community. We didn't go to church together and we didn't go to school together, but we looked out for each other. We protected each other. One of the biggest things in our community was Christmas times, Union 5 skates. If you didn't get anything else for Christmas, you wanted you a pair of Union 5 skates, because most of the time that's all your family could afford. And please don't lose that skate key, because you was in trouble when you lost that skate key. And we had a community of people who cared for the children, who looked out for the children. We didn't have any incidents in our community of abuse or anything like that. We disagreed. Oh, yeah, we would disagree. But what would happen at the end, the parents would usually come in, or the neighbors would get you. If you did something, it was okay for the neighbor to correct you. Your mama didn't come raising sand, and then you wouldn't want your parent to know that you was correct by Miss Marie, because then you'll get it again. Miss Ada had a mango tree, and Miss Washington had pecans. So a lot of times what we would do, we would go through the fence to Miss Washington's house, we get the pecans, and we go to Miss Ada and say, Ada, we got some pecans. We don't have any money to buy your mangoes, but we give you some pecans if you give us the mangoes. The early bartering system, we didn't even know. And then the Hamiltons would have the guavas and the limes, and we would just barter around in the neighborhood and love on each other and take care of each other and protect each other. As I said, I'm going to mention 3 things that some of you may not know, because I do history and I'm a historian and I do genealogy research. Some of you may not know we had a street from Highland to the river called Cuba Street. That was also Royal. You may see it as a short street now, right off of Florida Avenue. Massachusetts was off Palm. There were streets that we had that we lived in. Our house was a shotgun house. For the young people who may not know what it is, I think 13 did a series on last week about the shotgun house in Ybor City. And why they call it a shotgun house, because you can look straight through living room, down, straight out the door, and if somebody shot on the weekend, the bullet would go straight through. That's why they would call it the shotgun house, and sometimes it would be to the house in the back. We had dolls that we made. You got to raise your finger when I'm through. Yes. We had dolls that we would get bottles and put the rope in the bottles and pull the rope out and make our own dolls. We would make our own skateboards with the Union 5 skate and your boards. You put one across the top, one down, and one back, and you have your skates on each end of those. We made our own toys. We had our own games. We played marbles. We played pick-up sticks. We had all kind of sports things that we did that the kids don't do now. They just like this. But we played basketball. We played kickball. We would go to the roof of Miss Marie's house because her house was the Lord's house, and we played who can jump off the roof, hit the board with the brick on it. When we were jumping, and we jump off the house, somebody go next, and we jump off the house. So those were our games that we played, and we made our own toys. We had fun. We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor because everybody was, and everybody respected everybody. I was standing in my backyard. What had happened when I was in junior high school? They would ask us where we live. We say, "Oh, we live such and such a place." "Oh, y'all the river rats, because y'all stay right on the river, and y'all can watch." We get our our binoculars, and look over at Clarify Hospital and watch them take the people in and bring them out. And at the end of, I'm trying to get a lot in at one time, at the end of Estelle Street, there was this big pipe that came out with this, what we call sulfur water, that some of the young people may not have heard of. And if you go to Armature Works now, you will see they call that, they have a name for it now, but it's not the name what we call it, but it was sulfur water. They call it some kind of brook or spring, something. But it was a big pipe, and it was good for your nails, it was good for your skin, and it was good for your digestion.
Well, you'll have the mic again, Ms. Jenny. We're going to keep it, but you'll get the mic 2 more times. You get the mic 2 more times. Nice hand for her. Bishop Patty, please. Bishop Patty.
I have to come behind this, right? Good evening, and first of all, Fred, I'd like to thank you for making this all possible. I'm sitting here reminiscing about all the good old times, the good old days. I was raised up on North A Street, 1508 North A Street. If you go to the Walmart that is right there between Kennedy and North A, you will see a yellow house. My brother is the only house that's there. We lived across the street from that house. Our house was yellow, but that's how rooted we were in the community, that when that house became available, he purchased the house, and he's still there. We went from the community that I was brought up in. We didn't realize we were poor because everyone owned their homes there. We actually lived in homes. Yes, there were 7 and 8 of us in a house, but we were in a home. So we didn't realize that things were as rough or tough as they were. My mother actually went back to school, and she was a nurse at Clarify Hospital. I was born at Tampa General Hospital, and it sounds so old now, July the 22nd, 1953. And for y'all, all right, good year. And there was a school, and the school, I'm glad to see Miss Noreen Copeland-Miller sitting here. She and I are childhood friends that went to this school that was a wooden house. It was actually a house, a 2-story house. And we had the best of times because we had the best teachers. The teachers taught you, they spanked you, They did everything your parent didn't have to step in, and you didn't want the teacher to tell what had took place at the school. We played nukem ball, but what's really in my mind is during the Halloween time that we had these festivals at Dobyville. And my mother cooked the best pronto puff. Y'all call them corn dogs. She could not get them from North 8th Street quick enough to Dobyville. They would sell out. So we raised a lot of money. She was the president of the PTA for a number of years. We had doctors in the community that didn't know they were doctors. We had fishermen, you had beautician, and I think about on the corner of North A and Oregon, there was a dry cleaners called Mitchell's Dry Cleaners. So we had entrepreneurs back during these days. We had the pool hall, the shoe shine shop, the gambling hall, all that was in the community. And Ma Berry, the best restaurant, had the best bread pudding you could ever eat. So these are things that we actually had in our community that had an impact on me, that I decided long years ago when I was a child, 2 things I was going to do and not do. One, I would never be a drink. I would never drink, because we seen on Friday night, people would get paid, they would get drunk, they would get in fight, and they would end up at my house where my mother would have to sew them up, take a bullet out of them, or do something. So that right there told me, no, we're not going down that path. And the other was that I wanted to own my own business because I wanted to be independent. I can remember walking from Hyde Park all the way to downtown Tampa, to Crest, to Woolworth. We were in the bottom. We had to go in the bottom to be waited on. But you know what? That was okay, because we had family that loved us, that protected us, that shielded us. And I just love the other part of Hyde Park, because during Halloween, my brothers would go around Davis Island. They would go around the Bay Shore, and they would come back home with pillowcases full of candy. We didn't have to buy candy for the rest of the year. So these are good things that we had. And I just want to say something about the riots. Yes, it was terrible. I think the statute has run off. My brothers won't get in trouble for throwing Molotov cocktails, so we won't get them in trouble. But I met my husband doing that, because what they did, they brought the bus. They started busing, because we didn't have anything to do. There was no activities. So what they did to appease the African-American community, they started busing from Hyde Park to Port Tampa, and they brought us to Custodian Pool, where I met my husband in the pool. He and I both can swim. Of course, I couldn't, and he rescued me. And the rest is history. We're married now. But these are things that came out of, it wasn't all bad. And my brothers and them sold mistletoes downtown in front of, it was Mars Brothers at the time, and they sold the mistletoes, and they made a little money. They killed robins, and they sold, cleaned, and ate them. So we knew how to survive. And these are the things that we done as a community. But I cannot leave past the mic until I tell you this. 111 South Dakota, that was Mount Zion AME Church, where we had to go for Sunday school. We was in church all day long. I didn't mind, because they knew how to churn the ice cream. So we had, y'all see I'm an eater. We had ice cream. We had a sense of family. It was values. So these are the things that was instilled. So I don't curse out people. I don't talk, do all kind of stuff, because we were taught to have respect for one another. It was yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. My great-grands, I have 2 great-grands and I have a grandchildren, and they look at me, and I'm telling people who's younger than me, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and they looking at me like I've lost my mind. But this is what we were brought up. And I always tell them, people can see you before they hear you. So you need to carry yourself in a respectable, as a respectable person, because if you showing me a negative, nasty attitude, I don't care what's on the inside.
Amen. Thank you. So, Councilman Reddick, please tell us, what was it about the community that you grew up in that had the greatest influence on making you the person that you are today?
Well, first, I want to say I would love to have one of them corn dogs. Well, growing up in North Boulevard homes, I would say I enjoyed living in the condo that we had. It was one of the best. And the greatest thing about that, living in North Boulevard home, we had so many people that they were well known in the Tampa Bay community. That we were tight-knitted. You know, I don't know if you guys know about this, but there's the word called swish. That's where you take a broken piece of limb off a tree. And that brought about a lot of respect. I will tell you. And I had a lot of good people that influenced me during that time, because in my condo, we had a front door and a back door. Now, in the back door, a gentleman by the name of Leon McQuay lived towards my back door. Across the courtyard, everybody should remember this person, Geraldine Bonds. And then a block away, Otis Anthony. And to the west and to the east, Leroy Long. And these are some people that did things that make you want to do good and do right. And the greatest thing I had influence about is in the school system, particularly at Just. You had Robert Sanders. You had A. Brown. Jim Williams. They didn't take no mess. And I can tell you, I got a lot of paddles. Because there used to be a time where a lot of us like to skip school and go to West Tampa. And the police bring us back to the school. And then we got to go before them and get that paddle. But we were very, very strict, and the other thing is that influenced me, the respect we had with, I don't know if many of you heard about Bexley chicken. In West Tampa, Maine. That's the best chicken you can ever have. I tell you, if they open up one now, they'll sell out. Because we didn't have much money. Had to pay to keep the lights on for the condo. But the problem is, they love that chicken. And then Moses White across the street had the ribs. And what I learned living in the Norfolk Boulevard home is that we had respect for each other. It was a lot of respect for each other. And that respect and the discipline that was displayed allowed me to grow up and be the person I am today, because I didn't want to come across that switch anymore. Because it went from that switch to start getting shoes and thrown at you. And my mother used to always say, it was just two of us. My mother had 2 kids, and she used to always say, if I'm going to work 2 jobs, you 2 kids going to do right. Now, don't allow me to go to jail because I'm going to put you at the house. So that discipline and the respect we had in the community went a long way. And I would tell you, we used to walk the church from the North Boulevard home to First Baptist Church at West Tampa on Wheeler Avenue. And one of the things today is that people always ask me, why do you always wear suspenders? Well, I wore them back when I was growing up. And they was all kind of colors, because my mother used to always want to dress me in something plaid, and then she'd get plaid suspenders. So I know I looked like a clown going to church. So that's why, to this day, I always wear suspenders. But I enjoyed my time while I was living in North Boulevard home, and I have a great respect for a lot of those people who came through that same neighborhood.
Thank you, Frank Reddick. Right. Appreciate it. Artie. Mr. Artie Fryer.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm certainly happy to be here. I will say that I was born in 1952. I'm saying that because I was born in the Lily White Hospital. That happened to be on 29th Street. My parents lived in walking distance to that hospital, so I presume there was a quick walk to get there so I could be born. Sometime in the early 50s, we moved to where I lived. If you know where the Jackson Heights playground is, we lived directly across the street from there. So that was after 1952, so I'm presuming 53, 54, I don't know the exact date. But as we were talking about that documentary, you remember the 1955, I think? We talked about Progress Village. We talked about urban removal. That's what it actually was. They called it urban renewal, but the word was urban removal. I said that to say that I've seen pictures of our house. It was a single-family home. It wasn't large. It was wood frame. But there was a dirt road. And I remember the dirt road. I'm saying that because that community where I lived must have grown up around that time because they were all single-family homes in the Jackson Heights neighborhood that I grew up in. There were doctors, there were pharmacists, there were entrepreneurs, there were laborers, there were school administrators, there were teachers, there were professional people. I just knew that they were people and we could go to their yard and play. That's all I knew until I got older. But I say that and I point that out because as I got older, it got to be significant because there didn't seem to be any hierarchy in the neighborhood. It didn't seem to be as anybody had a particular status that would exclude anybody else. Now, growing up, I didn't know anything about status or anything. I happened to ask my mother one time, "Are we middle class?" And she laughed at me, and she said, "No, baby, we're poor." And I suppose that's because the schools I went to were in walking distance. I went to Lomax, I went to Potter, I went to Young, and I went to Middleton. I could walk to all of those schools. And what I think caused me to grow up with an expectation is that I never heard "you can't." Because growing up in the neighborhood, you saw a doctor, you saw a pharmacist, you saw the school administrators who probably were at the school that you went to, because my entire K through 12 experience was in all black schools. So it wasn't unusual to see accomplishment. I don't recall ever hearing a teacher or an instructor say to the class, and now keep in mind, we grew up during the 60s. This is during the 60s. Civil rights era, church bombings, those kinds of things. I never heard an instructor say to the class, "You can't do something." Never heard it. I'm trying now, even trying to recall an experience. I never heard it. So what was valuable to me is even in the worst of times, I'll put it like that, I didn't feel like it was the worst of times. There were people who supported us and challenged us. So I think that's important. I mentioned that in the neighborhood I grew up in, I saw pictures and I had to be 4 or 5 years old. Dirt roads. I remember when the streets got paved. It had to be after 1955. They got paved. What also happened is there were persons moving into the neighborhoods. Homes got constructed, and people moved in. As I got older, I began to understand that these were the people who had been moved out of the scrub or the bottom, because that's another area where the interstate came through and moved people out of areas that they lived. So I wasn't aware of it. It was just new people moving in. That was all part of the process. I'm saying that to say there was a sense of neighborhood. I never heard that you can't, and I saw accomplishment. I mentioned that I was born in the Lily White Hospital. I mentioned about urban removal. I lived directly across from the Jackson Heights playground. Let's say 50 yards from the playground. A public playground in Tampa. I only stepped foot in that playground when I was about 10 or 11 years old, because it was basically a white playground at that time. I remember they would play baseball at night, the lights would light up, and sometimes they'd hit balls over in our yard. Come by, they were polite, they'd get them. We had a fence around the house. James Cole was a barber and entrepreneur who just recently passed. In about 1962 or 63, he and his sons and some other people marched to that park and said, "My children are going to play here." I remember that. That was a significant moment in my life. I didn't realize anything was missing because we could play in our little enclave. What I saw Mr. Cole do helped me to realize the change that was happening. But what got to be more significant, my parents never had to tell me I couldn't go to that playground, and I'm going to end with this. What made me realize how tough that must have been for parents, I have grandchildren, and something was happening. How can a parent tell a child you can't go across the street to play? That's the environment I grew up in, but it did not, because of the neighbors and the strength of the community, it didn't diminish me and it didn't diminish my hope. But it caused me to realize there are real inequities during that time, and they still exist, and they shouldn't.
Okay, thank you, Artie. Don Lee, do you remember the question? It's been a while. Okay, Mr. Don Lee.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was born in 1959, and I was born in West Tampa and Cypress and Fremont. So that area of West Tampa, I am considered a Tampanian. From West Tampa, we moved to Central Park. My address was 3919 Governor, Apartment B, directly across the street, second floor. From there, I went to Meacham first and second grade. Miss Johnson was my first grade teacher, and Miss Jackson was my second grade teacher. Miss Johnson passed away 2 years ago. I happened to have the privilege of speaking at her funeral.
Hold the mic up, Tom.
I had the privilege of speaking at her funeral. I saw her every year throughout the year, and her daughter. My father had a bakery. He was the first black baker in Tampa on Central Avenue. So we would walk from the apartment down past the church, through the cut, past Chick, he had little stink dogs, behind his shop, across Central Avenue, to Miss Anime beauty shop. Bless, we buried her today. So I'm in a little ho-hum moment, across the street to my daddy's bakery shop. So my inspiration of me being where I am today, Central Avenue to me was businesses. As a 4-year-old little boy, I was standing in front of my dad's bakery shop and looked left, looked right. All I saw was business people, business owners. I remember a lady with the prettiest legs I ever saw in my life. It was Senator Athenia Joyner. She had the most gorgeous legs. I just looked way down there on the other end, down Central Avenue, and I was just waiting to see her walk out that door on that sidewalk, just to see her legs. Her father had a bar. Benny Schumann was my neighbor for 24 years behind my mother's house. He had a Bell's Bonds. Anna Mae Gilchrist, we buried her today. She had a beauty salon. Cozy Corner was right next to my dad's bakery shop. Lee Davis' pool room was next to my daddy's bakery shop. Kid Mason was a sundry. The Greek stand was on a corner. So I was surrounded by businesses and entrepreneurs, business owners. Those businesses supported the community. Those people that worked in those shops, that owned those shops, sent their children to school and colleges, bought cars, bought homes. So I was influenced early in life with businesses. As I grew up, from Meacham to Carver City, St. Peter Claver, when we moved the riot, reason we left the area, the riot in 1967, when Chambers got shot. So we moved to Carver City, going to St. Peter Claver, from St. Peter Claver to Mary Hebert Christian. We moved to Bamman Heights to Jackson Heights. From there, I went to Tampa Catholic, where I ended up going to Tampa Bay Tech, where I graduated in 1978, the first senior class black president. From there, I went to the Navy. So still at that young age, Miss Silas, God bless her, and so many people, I can't name all of them, but they took us and introduced us to the community to do things and be a part of. We were gleaning and going with the NAACP, being a part of active in the community, helping out. So I was groomed at an early age of giving back and doing things. And it was for free. Well, I didn't mind. That's all I know to do today. I give back. And the influence that I was around and under, and people that taught me how to do, how to give, that's all I know. So I try to share it to the younger people. Some get it, my nephew get it, some do, some don't. But it was a wealth of knowledge. So I surround myself with people that's smarter than me. So my influence of being an entrepreneur, I'm a chef, but I was understudy of some great chefs, well-renowned chefs, but I learned some things what not to do. It's not as well what to do, what not to do in this industry. So I never wanted a building. I learned not to go into a building because one of my friends, my mentors, they said, Don, it takes $1.1 million a year to operate their business. That meant that I got to work. Not that I was afraid of work, I got to work just to pay these bills, to maintain this business and this building and the staff. I said, wow, that's a lot of work. 2 years later, the economy crashed. It was a struggle to do that $1.1 million because they were not, the companies, the corporations was not doing the corporate lunches. We had to get creative to make that money. I said, I ain't gonna get caught like that. So I learned what not to do to maintain business. I never made that $1 million that year because I wasn't chasing that bag, but I learned a lot of things, what to do, what not to do. So I share it when I go to Tampa Bay Tech to the culinary class and talk to the students on the do's and the don'ts and what you can and cannot do. Not can't do, but shouldn't do, should and shouldn't, but do it. Because I saw all those businesses on Central Avenue stayed afloat. The only reason they did not stay afloat because of the riot. They were thriving businesses that sent kids to FAMU, BCC at the time, and other colleges. They made it. And because of what they went through, here I am today. I'm 64 years old. and I'm still going. And I pray to God I continue. And I give back, I share, I teach younger kids in this profession. I thank you.
Thank you, Don. We're going to go right to our final question panel because I really want to give the audience an opportunity to ask a few questions. So if you would, please try to keep your response to 1 minute, which is going to probably wind up being more than 1 minute, but please, this doesn't mean you have 1 more minute. This means please cut it off. This doesn't mean you got one more minute. So really, I know there's some questions out there, right? So we want to try to get to them. So here's the final question for the panel. Please, if you can, in 1 minute, what message do you have for today's youth about the value of knowing your history? Ms. Keaton?
Well, one of the things that I would say to the youth, because I always talk about it, I said, I wish I could get these young people to understand that the new technology is something that is dangerous to people like the old generation. I'm 70 years old, so I say to them is to look forward to being who you are, but being what you should be. Trust God, listen to your heart, and just make sure that you understand where you're going. So many of our youth today are leading in some of the wrong directions and not staying focused. And the respect, having respect not just for yourself, but to others. Even when someone says something to you that you feel you have to retaliate, you must understand that those things can pass away when you walk away from things that causes you to get angry at young people and their ways of doing things. I try my best to encourage young people to do exceedingly above what they can do, because that's the most important thing. But first of all, putting God first in their lives, because He is the answer to all of their problems, all of their troubles, and He can make anything brand new for them.
Thank you, Ms. Keaton.
What I would say today is to our young people, not to be ashamed of who you are, nor where your parents have been or where your parents have come from. When you know your history, you will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Learning from your history, being positive, listening. My grandmother, who could not read or write, but she could read the Bible, I never understood that. But she always told me, Francis, do it right the first time. If you do it right the first time, you don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to remember what you said or make up something. And especially learning your history, where we have come from. We have come a long ways. We have invented, maintained, and corrected a lot of things in the United States. And the more history that the young people know about themselves and about the African American culture and society, is their legacy of continuing it. The main thing is not to be ashamed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If they knew their history, the killings would stop. If they knew that they came from kings and queens, the killings would stop. What I grew up at Dobyville Elementary, and I just have to talk about that little wooden school where we had to drink water from a horse trough. It was a trough where the horses used to drink out of, and they put fountains in there for us. We had to come outside for the assemblies. We took the Pledge of Allegiance standing in front of this wooden house. And what I also remember, I'm still trying to find out what happened to Tom and Jerry, because when you was reading the books and you got into the story, you flipped the page over, the page was torn out, the books was hand-me-down, they was written all over, so we didn't know what the next step. So to our young people, find out your history, and then you would be proud to know who you are, and you would be the best that you can be.
Thank you, Bishop.
Even though this gentleman in Tallahassee is trying to remove our history, take it away from us, I would encourage our youth to do their research, to read as much as possible, because it's important that you learn your history. How can you discuss it or advise anyone about the history when you have no clue? So I think it's important that our youth take the time, instead of standing on the corner, instead of trying to rip off people's cars, go spend that time doing some research. And also take that time to read. If you take 1 hour a day to read, they can't take all the history away from us. There's still ways to get it. And I just advise them that it's important and critical that if they want to move forward in life, they need to know their history.
History is not just a matter of dates and times. It talks about a journey, whoever it is. I think it's important that young people realize that there has always been people who've tried to erase history, because if they erase certain parts of history, then it gives them the ability to control and to deny others. So I think that it's important that young people recognize that a journey speaks to survival and achievement and accomplishment. And I think that's central to making sure that you understand that you wouldn't be able to reach anything if the journey hadn't continued.
And Mr. Lee.
I tell my nieces and nephews, and my grandchildren to surround yourself with people smarter than you. Because if you don't, you can't go no further than you already are. The second thing I tell them, to discipline yourself. If you discipline yourself, then you can go further. If you don't discipline yourself, you don't have discipline, you can't go nowhere. So surround yourself with people smarter than you, discipline yourself, you can go further in life.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. We have some questions. We have some questions. If someone would bring me the questions, I'm going to read the questions here, and we'll try to get our panel to respond. And before we leave, Curtis Davis is going to favor us with another one of his spoken word renditions. So, questions? Anyone have any questions? Where are the cards? Okay, we're waiting for the cards. No one wrote any questions down. Pardon me? Okay, so Deacon Patty, please stand up. Now, here's the problem. This is being televised. We don't have mics out there. So is there a way we can do this? Because the plan is for me to read the questions from this mic. Let's see if that'll work. Now, it's being televised, so this is impromptu, but go ahead.
Okay, I want to ask the panel, how did integration affect your life for the good or the bad? Just how did it affect your life, and is it affecting the generation now?
Need the mic. We need the mic back, please. Okay.
I can't.
Well, we still need.
I can't comment on that question. I was born in '59, so I've kind of missed that era. So I'm gonna have to let everybody else answer that question.
Well, let me answer it because I'm still disappointed this day. You know, I went to Carver, and it's a feeding pattern. You go to Carver, you go to Just, and then after I completed Just, going to Blake in the 10th grade, they sent me that letter during the summer and told me if I wanted to graduate, I need to go to Plant. Now, all this time, I've been thrilled about going to Blake and to get that disappointment during the summer when all of my family just about went to Blake. So I'm the only one that was left out during that time. And I think it had a tremendous effect on all of those people who had their mindset to go to Blake. And I think it's affecting a lot of these students today because that's a major adjustment. And when we sent us to Plant during that 71, I believe it was 77 or 71, they had the biggest riot at Plant. And the people from Central Park in West Tampa, they tore up that place because they were mad and frustrated that they had to go to this school, and we've been segregated all this time, and then all of a sudden now they want to integrate us when we had our mindset to go to Blake High School.
I would like to speak on two areas. One was my children, because I'm 81 and a half years old, I'll be 82 in January. My children went to 4 different elementary schools, two different high schools, 2 different middle schools, and then they did not go to the same high school because of their ages and changes the zone, the boundaries, however it was to get the integration, for us to be the sacrificial lambs for integration. I had a problem because I was an adult. I saw segregation. Was in integration. When I went to, I finished Florida A&M, and I went to the University of Florida for my practitionership. I always, any procedure, anything that had to be done, I was always the first one to do it. And the reason why I was always the first one to do it, oh, Janice, you're always the first one to do it. I wanted to set the standard. I wanted to set the goal. I didn't want to follow behind someone else. There was deep, deep prejudice at the University of Florida in that nurse practitioner program. I got a letter after we graduated. They gave it to the director of nursing from Putnam County or somewhere. Then they sent me a letter saying, we made a mistake. We rechecked our records. You were the one who was the #1 student. Do you get what I'm saying? They put the Caucasian lady up. I was second. If I was not first, why would you go back and check it? But seeing that and doing that, I had to dot every I, cross every T, and answer to every I and every T. I enjoyed my profession. I enjoyed my clientele. I had to have a standard where I could not deviate 1 inch. And that's the price you pay when you're in situations like that.
Okay, before we go further, and thank you, Ms. Jennings, we still have a little bit of time. If you have a question, there are index cards somewhere out there. Please get the index cards to folk who raise their hands so they can write their questions down. We apologize for not doing that earlier. We still have a little bit of time because I want to give the audience an opportunity, our guests, to have some questions write them on the card. And I need to read the questions from the mic because there are people looking at this live as well as it's being taped for later broadcasts. So someone was going to respond. Bishop Patty?
If I may, being the last class to come out of segregation, let's keep it real. My family, my parents was asking for equality. They wasn't asking for what they ended up with, where you're at different schools, where you don't know who the folks are. What took place, it was good and it was bad. We wanted the same books. We wanted the same opportunities. That's what we were asking for. What we got was when our children started being integrated, the first thing was told that you will not put your hand on our children. That's when things got lax with control of taking care of the kids and being responsible. I went all the way to Tallahassee with Senator Hargett. There was a spanking bill. Many of you don't know. You can spank your children. You just can't abuse them. You can't draw blood. So whereas in the black family, yeah, it's there. In the black family, we knew that time out didn't work for Johnny. Time out, maybe you need to get a little spanking every now and then. Time out, we wasn't used to children talking back to not that all Caucasian did this, but these are some of the things that we picked up that you could be disrespectful because they taught them to express themselves, where we was not expressing ourselves the way that we see children now are expressing themselves and doing the things that they're doing. So a whole lot got, mixed up. But what we was asking for and what Dr. King fought was for that we can have the same rights. We can walk into a restaurant. We can go into a store. We can do this. That's all. Saying we are human and we should have the same rights as anyone else, but not what we ended up with. So yes and no.
Okay, so we have two questions. Thank you, Bishop. Let me get to these two questions, and anyone on the panel who'd like to respond can do so. How do we recover from the effects of urban renewal in present policy? How do we recover our roots? So, someone like to tackle that? And we saw the video and we heard some comments about urban renewal or urban removal, however you want to term it, as one of our panelists did. So, Ms. Jennings?
I think programs like these that we're having now, I think that if we start kindergarten, teaching our children our history, teaching our children about lines, teaching our children the history, encouraging them that classes will be taken, and the churches have programs, doing things in your churches, doing things in our community, doing things at the centers, teaching the children the information, our historical legacy that we had that has been kind of diminished some. I think if we as adults and older people take the initiative to do that. One example is I sign up at Blake all the time. Well, everybody know me over there. But I sign up and I teach a class over at Blake. And I teach Blake's history. But guess what? I do more than Blake's history. I tie in everything that's needed. Urban removal, gun laws, how you treat your neighbor. You put everything in there. We can do it. They say they can take whatever out of school they want to, but you can't take out of a person's heart or out their family.
Any comment?
I want to remind us that Mr. Hearns mentioned a book, The Color of Law. You should read that. We talk about history. It contains history, and it speaks about how laws were written by people who were elected that were deliberately designed to disadvantage certain groups of people. Two things in that comment, and I'll end. People who were elected chose to do things to disenfranchise and deny people certain rights and privileges. It's unbelievable what's documented and what was done by local elected officials. We need to be careful that it doesn't continue to be done.
Thank you. Okay, do we have one more comment from the panel on this question, and then we'll go to the next question?
I would like to say clearly, stop selling off your birthrights. Many of us have properties that mom has left us, grandmama has left us. Stop selling your property. That's number one. And you don't have to sell. My brother is a prime example. They call him every day, all day, to sell his house, and his house is still sitting there. Secondly, register to vote. You need to get out and vote. Stop sitting around saying your one vote don't count. If it didn't count, then they wouldn't be spending all these millions of dollars on commercials and running out here to tell you your vote don't count. Your vote matters, it counts, and if you look at how the laws have been changed, the governor can still be the governor when he loses the election as president. The laws can be changed if we have the right people sitting in the right seats.
Let me just say this briefly, and that is our greatest failure as being a former elected official is that people in the community do not read the comprehensive plan for the city or county. All this stuff we're talking about now is in that plan. And that plan is normally set for almost 10 or 15 years in advance. And a lot of people don't know who they need to watch is the Department of Transportation. Because they trying to close everything in the black community. They closed down 40th Street exit. They trying to do over here off in Nebraska and where they want to close that exit. They want to put a 4-lane highway with one of them be a express bus line on the interstate, which gonna move people out. And that's what, and all this is in the plan. So I get so frustrated when I ask people, have you read the city and county comprehensive plan? And most of them look at me like I'm crazy. And the problem is, a lot of this stuff is already in there. And what we need to do, we need to go to that planning commission meeting where they develop these plans and voice our concern. So that's what we need to do.
Okay, we have one more question that I want to get in, and then we'll have our spoken word artist to come back and close us out. So this question really is for Artie Fryer. For the gentleman born in 1952, was that the year? In Lily White Hospital, said he never heard "I" or "you can't" from teachers. So does the panel think, and this is not just for Artie, does the panel think students hear "I" or "you can't" too often today?
I would just have to presume, let me put this in this context. I think it's more important to encourage a student, even ones who don't seem to be excelling. It's more important to encourage than discourage. And that's why I said I don't remember and I can't. We got disciplined, we got chastised, but we weren't told you can't be something. We were always encouraged that we could be something. I'm going to end. I told my son, who's going to be 38, 39, 40. I said one of the things that helped black people during the time was James Brown. When he said, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud." Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and smiled. And then what was this show with Yeah, this family with Dinah Ross's daughter. Blackish.
Oh.
Came on and the grandfather, the father said the same thing. He looked at me and said, I heard that. I said, Aaron, that's what happened. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. I said all that to say, if you encourage children and give them opportunities, they will do well. If you discourage them, that's the person who's trying to discourage them will succeed.
Well, thank you. Okay, do we have one more comment, and then we need to bring Mr. Davis back.
I just would like to say this. I was working with children that were elementary and some of the babies who had lead poisoning. And some of those children were so out of everything. They were fighters, they were doing all of this. My thing was I went in there and I started singing to these children, because that's what we got when we were little. The other was, I can do it all by myself, all by myself. Those were some of the comments that I always encouraged them. And I talked to the parents. You cannot allow your children to talk back and say no to you, and you accept it. It's your job to train up your child in the way that they should go, that they will never depart. The other is, we have to engage ourselves as parents. And I'm saying this because the number of children I have worked with through 20-something years, I learned that you have to engage them starting when they're 1 and 2 years old, because these children today don't know what stop means and no. You have to say it and believe that you're saying it so they understand. And talk to them looking at them so they look at you. And the best thing to do is always read to your children and sing. And I want to sing my little song I sang to the children. Before I left any daycare or elementary school, I would say this, and my second grade teacher, Miss Shields, used to sing this. When I grow too old to dream, I'll have you to remember. When I grow too old to dream, your kiss will live in my heart. So kiss me, my sweet, and so let us part. 'Cause when I grow too old to dream, your kiss will live in my heart. And I want to say that because I was working with one of the agencies, and the lady said, my granddaughter talks about you. She says, and hold on. She put me on the phone with her, and she started singing to me. And she said, Miss Cynthia, I'm doing so well in school, and I love every teacher that I go to. So we have to start embellishing that in our children at a young age, because that's what happens to us. This panel on here, you know, our parents would look at us crazy if we got stepped out of line. And you couldn't go to church acting crazy, okay? Because they would really give you the eye, and at home, it was time for you to understand there was something gonna happen.
Let's give our panel a hand, please. You all are getting a standing ovation, looks like. Mr. Davis, our spoken word artist, is going to come back and close us out, and we're going to let him have the final word this evening. And let me say, you all have been a wonderful audience. Our guests, we appreciate it. The Tampa Housing Authority, Tampa Bay History Center. Give yourselves a big hand. Thank you.
All right. I won't take too long because I don't want to get the finger, but I just want to say this is such an important event, and thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your insight. I feel so much closer to Tampa and my roots here. So thank you for that. And again, thank you for having me. Quick plug, if you want to see some more poetry within the community, I actually coordinate poetry events here. I have a company called, brace yourself, Grow House Tampa. We don't sell that stuff. We grow artists. But yeah, we do a bunch of poetry events in the community. So we have a website. Just check us out, growhousetampa.com, or you can speak to me after the event. This final poem here is called Hard Candy. I found a razor blade in my candy last night. A confetti of red, white, and blue lies spewed from my tongue as if I were running for president. Children should be seen and not heard, so America puts razor blades in its baby's candy. Hard candy, hard times, call for desperate measures, measure the dimensions of a jail cell, and you will find the exact length and width of the heart of a drug dealer trying to support his family, but his mouth be a jailhouse. So all he does is spit bars and dream about flashy cars, ignoring the scars on his back. He's selling crack. He's stepping on too many cracks. He's breaking his mother's back. Bone, thugs, in harmony, singing in the same tune, sleeping in the same tomb, forgetting they are of royal womb, suffering the same doom. Young black men whose fathers abandoned them before their hands were large enough to hold time, raised by Uncle Tom, Uncle Sam, and Aunt Jemima on Sundays, and some days they're trapped in a sun daze, distracted by the sun ray, Charles vision. What happens when genius and addict make collision? When good people make bad decisions, don't know whether to listen to that demon or the angel, hula hooping with halos, playing God in a theater full of atheists, feeling like no one believes in you. But I believe in you. It's time to stop playing Where's Waldo with your future. You're running out of days, hours, minutes, seconds to be somebody. And every breath taken is a breath lost. So do not lose yourself in the atmosphere. There ain't a whole lot of room to breathe up there. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Curtis Davis.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. Again, we'll see you December 14th. Put it on your calendar. Go to tampabayhistorycenter.org when registration begins. And thank you all so much and have a safe trip home.